Hello and welcome to my twisted mind. Today we're going to be talking about some fucking fuck. Now everyone and their waifu has had their say on why this movie is bad, and who can blame them? This movie was terrible, and almost all of the major complaints are unanimously agreed upon by the people unlucky enough to have wasted 100 minutes of their short life being bombarded by unnecessary slow motion and sound mixing done by a middle schooler. A story with uniquely Japanese elements was watered down and made incredibly bland. Ryuk was proactive instead of benevolent and amused, and the whitewashed protagonist is less of a genius and more of that creepy dude you dated in sophomore year of high school for like a week who became a meninist and is probably now a Nazi. But what I want to scream into the void about today is the ending. The part of a terrible movie that should be great because the sweet release of the end credits are coming, but instead made this movie go from a mediocre and infuriatingly boring movie to being a mediocre and infuriatingly boring movie that thinks that shit smells like roses. It's like a Tim Burton movie. In the twist ending of the movie, after it looks as though White is cornered with nowhere left to run and a handful of seconds left to live, the movie informs us that the entire end sequence of events, with a giant Ferris wheel collapsing and a series of events that leave White in a coma and unable to continue committing murders that are taking place, was really an elaborate plan by White. Here's the ending flashback scene where White Yagami pulls a Light Yagami.
Dr. Norman Ludlam. On the night of October 12th, Norman Ludlam is present at the pier when two individuals fall from the northwest Ferris wheel. He rescues a male suspect from the water and manages to revive him, saving his life. Using his connections at the hospital, Ludlam keeps the suspect in a medically induced coma for 2 days. At the end of this period, he leaps to his death from the roof of the hospital. Aaron Peltz. Peltz retrieves the death note from the river on the night of October 12th. Each night, Peltz fills in the blanks in the notebook with the name of criminals who appear on the nightly news. On day 2, he returns the death note to the Kira suspect and then commits suicide. Mia Sutton is killed when she accepts the death note from her boyfriend. As the northwest Ferris wheel mysteriously collapses, she pulls the page with my name on it from the note, and it is ultimately consumed by fire. Although her boyfriend lands safely in the water, Mia strikes the shoreline, dying instantly.
So I bought a death note for the purpose of this review and nothing else, and I was able to review the original rules. And while the movie at least stays in line with whatever rules they feel like they want to bring up, the way that Light uses them throughout the movie are haphazard at best. Feels less like an intricate plot by a genius and more like a little kid melting his army figures with a magnifying glass. We never really get to accept Light as smart, so this scene really feels like it comes out of nowhere. In the anime, we spend so much time with Light, learning the way that his mind works and how much time and effort he puts into keeping his secret. In like the 3rd chapter, right after L reveals himself to the public, in a way that's way less stupid than the movie, Light rigs explosives in his own bedroom so that if anyone tries to open the secret compartment in his drawer he keeps the death note in, the entire desk will catch on fire and destroy the death note. But in the movie, he just kind of always has it with him, and uses it in plain view of other people, and reveals it to the first person who makes eye contact with him for like no reason. Like, they aren't even friends. She just sits down and he's like, look, I can kill people, and that gets her wet, I guess. So off the bat, we aren't shown the primary characteristic of this character, that he's a genius. And so we have no reason to believe a genius application of the death note by the time we get to this point. Light Yagami is a genius. This guy is a toddler. And we are expected to believe that this toddler, in like 5 seconds while on the run from an incredibly beautiful man that he pretty much confessed to like a day or 2 ago, suddenly knew how to make a complicated scheme involving the mind-controlled powers in the death note that don't make sense and have never been shown to work this elaborately beforehand, and was able to not only control the actions of several people, but this? He actually talks about the Ferris wheel and the fire. He can't have control over those things unless he makes somebody do those things, but it just kind of feels like he's the god of this situation, and not in the Light Yagami way, and like he actually can control every single thing that happens around him. In contrast, in the first manga, Light Yagami mind controls a few people towards the beginning, but he starts small because he's testing how the death note works. It's a natural escalation instead of a sudden jolt into a new extreme. The first time we really get a taste of Light's smarty smartness is in the last chapter of the first manga, where he mind controls a criminal to hijack a bus that he's on so that he can trick the FBI agent that's tailing him into revealing his true name so he can mind control that guy in the next issue into using the death note to kill a bunch of his own guys. It's really shocking when it happens, but we've seen Light and how he thinks beforehand, so even though he sucks and is a piece of shit, the audience is in awe of how well crafted and intricate his plan is. You see, if you set something up early on in the story, story, the audience will believe a similar thing happening later. If the movie had shown White testing out the mind control in more creative ways than this one salute and the people writing stuff, then it would have been more believable. Like, say he and his dumb girlfriend had a montage or two of them testing out the different methods on criminals to see what worked and what didn't, instead of just having them kill a billion people for the fun of it and then throwing mind control at the wall to shock the audience. Then we could have been gradually able to believe that White was capable of what happened at the end. As a very simple example of a believable setup for a MacGuffin, let's look at Zootopia. Spoilers for the movie Zootopia. I'm only giving a spoiler warning for this movie and not Death Note because Zootopia is worth watching. So the first time Michael Bluth shows his true colors as a schemer and as being capable of a long con, he says the phrase, "It's called a hustle, sweetheart." Later, Super Bunny Hop secretly records him admitting to tax fraud and repeats the same line. At the beginning of the third act, when Usagi Hop is apologizing for being a racist fuck, Fox McCloud reveals that he was recording her, and even uses the exact device she had used on him previously. At this point, the use of the recording device, the character's craftiness, and the phrase, "It's called a hustle, sweetheart," have been set up over the course of the movie. At the very end, bad guy's like, I'm the bad guy, and then they reveal that they were recording her and say the phrase again. While the other parts of the movie were happening, we were being given information to make us believe the events of the resolution could make sense. So how does Death Note compare? How are we introduced to our protagonist's genius? He does some math. The elementary school kids I nanny can do math, but that doesn't mean that they can cause an international years-long crime thriller. There's a difference between vague intelligence and something that can actively drive your plot and make your story believable. I don't know, if your movie is mediocre, whatever. Maybe people can get a good laugh, but when your writing is this incompetent and unfaithful to the narrative that you are trying to tell, then you've done something wrong. Also, this movie is garbage because Matsuda's not in it.